I welcome all to the Accessibility Uncovered webinar 2.0. So, let's talk about accessibility, spread awareness, and create maps for all. So, that's our motto. And the picture you see here are all the pictures I've taken from Diogo's Instagram profile and created a collage. So, thank you, Diogo, for giving me the permission to do so. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. Please be on mute till the end of the presentation. Do not share your screen during the presentation. In case if you want to ask or say anything, please type it in the chat box and we'll respond. We do have a Q&A session in the end. So whatever accessibility related questions you have, kindly type it in the chat box so that, we can give you a time to ask them to the guest speaker. This webinar is being recorded and may be hosted on YouTube. And for the this is especially for the local guides who have joined. Please put your name and connect IDs in the chat box so that we can tag you in the recap on Connect. So this is the program in short. It will be an introduction followed by a presentation by our guest speaker Diogo. There'll be a Q&A by the One Accessibility team, Q&A or an interaction session for the attendees as well, and a thank you or conclusion session. Yeah. So about our guest speaker Diogo Martins, not all know him, but couple of days we met and me and Jesse and we were talking with him, and it's really interesting to know so many details about him. Thank you so much, Diogo, for sharing with us and coming here today. We are really honored to have you. So let me give a quick introduction of Diogo. Diogo is a train enthusiastic and since he remembers, which led to a passion for transport and urbanism. He loves to explore cities and different cultures. He has been involved in several Lisbon pedestrian accessibility plan phases and supported the public transport operators to improve accessibility. I mean, which is great. And he's also the co-founder of the first independent living center in Portugal and is a part of first pilot projects on personal assistance for disabled people, and currently, he's an inclusive design manager at Systems in UK. Wow, that's really nice, Diogo. So, on this amazing intro of Diogo, I think Diogo, you can just go ahead and present, and we are all yours.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Diogo, and I will just share quickly something. Yeah, just give me a second, and here we go. Yeah. So just to quick start with a really quick introduction for today. We are going to basically to talk about accessibility in general, but of course, since we are in a webinar from a group that works mostly on things that are more focused for tourism, I would touch more on travel related things, and I will just kind of start, and I will start by talking about what is disability. But basically, disability, there is a definition for disabilities. It's not something that you can just come up with. It's something that is already worked on, and people have this on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Disability is defined as an involving concept because it's not really a closed topic. It's something that goes on in terms of debate across time and many different situations. So it is basically the results from the interaction between us as persons and the environment that surrounds us. And The environment is not just physical environment; it is also the society that sees us in a different way, or act to us in a different way than to other people. So, but uh, who are we in fact? So we are 15% of the world population. It's not just a really small group. We are in most of the countries we are about 10% of the population, but there are countries where we are up to 50% of the population in terms of some kind of impairments and difficulties to use the environment. In fact, uh, this becomes a problem when we start breaking apart some of the things that are related to disabled persons. For example, in terms of employment, in entire world, the majority of the disabled persons are actually unemployed. These have huge impacts in terms of the way we can live, the access to basic needs, and also the way we travel. So, for example, the statistic says that between 70 and 19% of the disabled persons are actually unemployed in entire world, um, and there isn't. It's not possible to have a really precise number because these numbers are different according to the methods that are used by each country. But that have a huge impact in terms of economics. For example, in terms of European Union, and this is a study from 2012, the impact that we can generate just from travel around Europe is about 356 billion euros. So it is not just uh, a small amount of money. Is actually about 3% of the EU income every year, and this represents for just for transport travels represents about 780 million travels every year. So uh, this have a huge impact in terms of services and the way we have to plan everything to make one single journey. It's really difficult to plan all of these things and make this happen, but we still do, and this number represents that we still travel. But the lack of accessibility have also impacts. For example, again, in European Union, even before Brexit, so this includes UK, um, the lack of accessibility actually represents 142 billion euros of losses every year. So we are talking about a huge amount of money that we just don't spend on tourism, and that represents less employment and less services and everything related to that. I will talk many times about this sentence. This is used by disabled persons across the world. It's nothing about us without us, and I will explain why we are always saying this because accessibility is one of those things that uh, we are often out of the conversations, and I think that we need to include more people with disabilities and make these things happen and make everything accessible. So what is in fact accessibility? In accessibility, have this definition, or it's one of many definitions that can be used, and the accessibility can be defined as the environment's ability to provide to all its users an equal opportunity to use it directly, immediately, permanently, and as autonomously as possible. And it is really important to have all of these things. Uh, First thing is about uh, empowers our autonomy. Is like uh, the way accessibility is implemented in our environment is important to make sure that we just can move around as autonomously as possible, and we can just go there and don't have to worry with booking in advance for services, or just go there and have to ask for a specific key to a security guard or someone else. We don't have to do all of these things. We have to just go there and use the facilities. Uh, Accessibility also improves quality of life. It is impressive the way you can go to some more accessible place and you feel just like a random person. Does it doesn't matter. The disability doesn't matter when you go to somewhere which is really accessible. It's a really great feeling. I will talk about that later. But it also enables us to be full citizens. What this means is that um, uh, every time a place is not accessible, uh, some of our possibilities and some of the things that makes us full citizens are not allowed to us. So, for example, if you want to vote, sometimes you can't. You just can't vote because the place is not accessible, or the infrastructure to vote is not accessible. So uh, it is important to make sure all of these things work together to make us full citizens, because we are actually people. So we are persons, and we have the same rights than everyone else. So we have to get access to everything as everyone else. So moving on. Um, why that sentence is important? Because across time, um, we have been out of conversations because mostly because of the perception of that we are not exactly the same thing as everyone else. So we are not person enough, and these things have huge impacts in terms of the way society looks at us, and the way things are actually done. So, for example, in terms of accessibility, there are a lot of work done already, and of course, this some of this work was done with people with these engagement processes, and of course with disabled persons. But most of the work was done by non-disabled persons, and the problem is when these non-disabled persons don't want to listen to our needs, and that's when accessibility goes wrong. So most of the impacts that we have is about wrong perceptions about us, the way people feel that they should impose to us some specific rules that are not in place for other people. For example, one of the problems about travel is you have to book in advance. Um, for example, for a train, you have to book in advance. In most of the places, it's about 48 hours in advance. So you have to think really careful when you want to travel and to where you want to travel. And if there is a problem with the service, you just get stuck, and people don't know what to do with you because you didn't book in advance for a service which is not planned. Um, this is a really big problem, especially in places where you can just travel by train for long distance services. For example, in Europe, you can just take a TGV train anywhere and just use that service to cross three different countries. But it's for anyone, it's really easy. So you just buy a ticket and go inside the train and you go. There is no problem, no struggles with this. But for us, it's a process that we have to buy the ticket, to book in advance, to exchange emails or call someone and book all these services, and this needs sometimes stops us from travel. This is also true for airplanes, and even worse because airplanes are not all accessible. So if you get a small airplane for your travel, you actually can't go there because the airplane doesn't have the space for the wheelchair, for example. And there are many other problems, even for different disabilities. For example, a blind person, if that person doesn't have accessible information, for example, in braille or tactile paving on streets, that person just don't go there because that person will not get information and will feel not and will not feel welcome. Uh, so that's why all of these things are important. Engage with disabled persons is extremely important. You have to really understand our needs and the way we use the environment and everything else, and make sure that you understand we are actually experts on our needs. We are not just saying this because yes, we are saying because we experience this as persons. We know how this feels for us. Um, and actually, accessibility is is for everyone. Is it has impacts in terms of everyone else lives and the way people use the space. For example, when we have accessible crossings on streets, we are actually improving everyone else's lives because there is less risk for people to fall. There is less stop timing just to get up on the curb and things like that. So if this really impressive the way accessibility can impact everyone else's lives. Even a ramp is impressive the way you just put a ramp in some place and you can see the change between the stairs and the ramp. So people will opt for the ramp if there is a ramp there, and that means that the people actually don't really like steps. We just make steps because yes, and at some point accessibility will become invisible, and that's when good accessibility is in place. So if accessibility is not a thing that you have to make sure it is segregated from everything else, or you have to notice that it is there. Um, if you just don't notice it, it's because it is good, and everyone uses and the person doesn't understand. It is an accessible feature. Um, I think these are really the important topics to start our discussion. I will let everything else for the Q&A time, and I think it's everything for now. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Diego, for the presentation. It was really nice and it was good to know. And I absolutely, I mean, agree with all of the points. And it's true. It's true. I mean, when accessibility is entirely there, we don't notice it. And that's so true. And I know this because when I had a baby and I had to carry him in a stroller, wherever there used to be ramps, I didn't used to know, but where they used to be very small entrances or something, I used to feel, oh my god, how do I take him in? So yeah, it's not just about disabled people. You're absolutely right. It's for everything. Everyone benefits. It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
Can
you
totally.
don't have to. You don't have for example, when I at some time ago I saw Jessica posting some things on Instagram about this was really a long time ago because of COVID. So when she was in Argentina doing some mapping of restaurants, and I spot some of them have like really big ramps and colorful ramps and things like that, and yeah, and there are other ones which don't have anything. It's just the same entrance. You just go there and you don't notice it is an accessibility feature. It's just an entrance. Yeah.
Right, right. So I guess we can now start with the Q&A session, like from the One Accessibility team perspective. The first question that I had was like, what makes a place accessible according to you? I mean, because we do a lot of mapping and also, and we give the reviews also. I really wanted to know from your view, like what is an accessible? What makes a place an accessible one? I mean, basic requirements. What should be there?
Well, it's not as simple as it seems. It's different according to every person. So for me as a wheelchair user, is more about having wheelchair access and space and ramps, etc. So you don't you. I will not go to a place where there is a step, for example. So if there is a step, even if it is small, I would not go there because there is a step. Yeah. So my wheelchair doesn't like steps, and I don't like steps either. So the problem is like uh, it's not really the same thing for every single person. For example, for me, it's less important to have an accessible toilet in every single place. But for some people, this is really important. For example, there are people that doesn't go, they just don't go to a place if there isn't an accessible toilet there, and this is a requirement for many. Um, for me, it's really about these things of having no steps, streets have to be really comfortable and and have these accessible crossings and things like that. Transports most have ramps or step-free access, so it is important. For example, when we talk about trends. It is important to make sure that future trains and trams are step free because this is really important for us to have this really easy access to these vehicles. So it is really about these little details that you have to think about and plan carefully to make sure that this works. And they are there. Just that they have to be there. Just that.
So I guess like even if there's a ramp or something, it has to be of a proper what do you say, width and length as well, right, for the wheelchair or the mobile vehicle to go in,
Yeah,
right?
yes, there are a lot of technical specifications you can have. So it depends on many other things like even depends on the country. So if you are in UK, you have to think about different specifications than in Portugal. For example, there are differences between the way people use the space, and you have to think about that. For example, in terms of ramps, you have to make sure that if it is in UK, you have to make sure it is more resistant to slippery, for example. So you have to make sure that materials are good and they have this adherence to material, so um, you don't get um, you do not have problems using the ramps, for example. But if it is in Portugal, it is not so relevant like that because the way it rains in Portugal doesn't make uh, materials so slippery at all times, so you can just have less uh, uh, worries about these things. But for example, you have to think about sizes. If the ramp is have the correct size in terms of the space we need to move our wheelchair around, it is the same thing everywhere. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's just follow the current rules. Of course, you have to sometimes rethink all of these things because these things are around for decades in most of the places, and you have to just think like uh, make some good questions to yourself when you are thinking about these things like is does this really work? Does this really make sense? And people like this, or is just some outdated thing, and design should be improved, or like that. So it is something that sometimes we have to go back and rethink these things. So, like you said, this is not about having a checklist, so, because especially when it becomes, even I struggle with this. Like when I go to somewhere and I want to put on Google Maps this information, I feel like okay, I'm doing this according to my uh, personal point of view, and that point of view doesn't represent everyone else's point of view. So what is accessible for me probably is not accessible for someone else, and that's a challenge. That's really difficult to make sure that when I'm uploading information is really accessible because it maybe not for someone. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering our question, Diogo. As you say that it's different for everyone, like, and it depends, really depends on the person. So my next question would be like, which is the most accessible place that you have been to, and why?
So there is no perfect place. Okay, so there isn't such a thing. Unfortunately, because but I think the most accessible place was Strasbourg in France. Um, Strasbourg is a kind of small city, but it's very accessible in terms of streets and trams and many shops are fairly accessible. They are not really the best examples, but you can go inside. For example, you can just go inside the shops and check their products or for example in the coffee shops you can just go there and be there and this is fairly fine. Um, and one of the things I like the most is the tram network. Is really impressive the way they have designed their tram network because you just go inside the tram without any help and all the stations are accessible. So you just use it as everyone else. It's like I don't know exactly how to describe the feeling, but it makes me feel like a person. It's difficult to tell how it works, but it's like it's just there, and you don't feel like you don't have to book in advance, or you don't have to call someone. You just go and use. Yeah, it's impressive.
That's really good to know. And like, you are a lot into a designing, and you mentioned that you also help the local public transport and other places, to help them understand like what actually is required over there. So like, the next question that we had was, what would you recommend for a non-accessible shop or a place, because we visit a lot of, when we travel, or when we are putting the reviews or whatever on maps, we see a lot of shops, restaurants, which are not accessible. So what is the best thing that you would suggest if you were there, like, rebuilding is a good option, or any other option that you generally suggest to such people?
Well, will depend on the infrastructure, but uh, the first step I would suggest is to engage with some people. Like if the shop owner can do that or can hire someone to do that, but it's like the main topic is about understanding the needs of the persons that are going to use the shop. So you do exactly what they need. Of course, there are rules to follow. So if depending on your country, you have different laws to follow, and those laws already specify exactly what do you have to do, and you have to follow those rules. You can't just say I don't want to follow this part of the rules. You just have to do that. Period. So it is not an option. But of course, the thing is, uh, the thing is really about uh, understanding people needs. So I would recommend this exercise of trying to understand why some people are not using that store and data. Why they don't go there and try to fix that? Because that's what will make the difference. Is like understanding why people don't go there and fix those problems and make people go there because they are fixed. For example, in terms of accessibility, you might need to rebuild store at some point if store is really old. For example, the same with the restaurants. There are there are many places where the problem is about uh, what was built like in the 80s, for example, or in the 70s. So you have to rebuild because there is no other way to do that. But of course, you have many other ways. So it is really dependent on what you get from the disabled persons you engage with and the way you analyze all of this information. Yeah.
Yeah, these are some great tips, Diego. I mean, when even we go to shops and we try to convince them, I think we can really use these points. These are really good points. I mean, because some of the shopkeepers or some restaurant owners, they are like, this was this, especially which are built very old, which are very old. So they really resist. They are like, no, it'll cost more or whatever. So they have their own reasons. But yeah, some people don't want to disturb whatever it was, like the way it is built. They keep it looking something antique or to give an antique look. These are what of the things that I've heard when I used to tell them to make things accessible. But yeah, these are really good tips. Thank you so much, Diego. So just let me check. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead. I mean,
Hi, Isha.
Isa, we have several questions here on the chat box. Sorry, Mika, go ahead.
Yeah.
Amika, go ahead.
Okay, so I have three questions for Diogo. So quickly, my first question is this: between Lisbon and London, which of the cities is more accessible? Then secondly, he said disabled people are experts in accessibility, development. So I would like to know: is it every person who is disabled that has ideas of accessibility laws and standards like ADA is required to develop accessible environment. Then thirdly, I want to know if Diogo uses Google Maps for navigation. So those are my three questions. Thank you.
So I'm afraid that I didn't understood the second. If you can put that on chat and then I can go back because the other two I could get it. I will go. So for the first question, and I am correct me if I understood wrong, but you asked me what are the most accessible cities. So um, it's like I'm not really sure. I have been in London in 2001 and I found it really accessible at the time compared to Lisbon because Lisbon wasn't really accessible at all in 2001. Then Lisbon improved a lot and um, so now we are kind. Yeah, it's a bit difficult, but we have some parts of Lisbon are accessible and others are not so accessible. But for example, Strasbourg is obviously one of the most accessible cities that I know. For example, uh, Barcelona is also very accessible. I know it is not so good for blind persons, so I wouldn't say it is accessible for everyone, but it is accessible for wheelchair users mostly. And then for example, you have Madrid, which is really confusing because it is accessible, but it's not really accessible. It is like it is accessible by accident. So, oh yeah, you have the versions. So yeah, comparing Lisbon to London is like the Lisbon subway is more accessible than the London one, but of course this is a scale problem. Lisbon subway is really small compared to London Underground, so London is huge. It's like one of the biggest in the world, and Lisbon one is one of the smallest in the world. So it is really difficult to compare these things. Also, the Lisbon subway is um, is new compared to the London one. So you have that London have this infrastructure problem of very old stations with almost 100 years and things like that. So the Lisbon one, the oldest stations have now 60 years. So it is really different. The way we can adapt these stations. About the second question, just let me read it. Uh, yes, where people don't we don't have to be experts in law, okay? So we don't have to be like really the, the guys that always know about all the rules and all the specifications, etc. That comes with time. So we just go. If there are people like me that really enjoys this and really likes this, we just learn and we just use these things. But in most of the cases, we don't really need to understand or to know these laws and standards. We just need to understand exactly what are our needs, because then there are people that work on technical side of things. There are designers, there are architects, etc. So these people, they know the technical standards and they know how to apply them to the projects, and they know how to combine these standards with our needs. So, for example, if you say that, let's talk about toilets, for example. If you say that your need is an accessible toilet with some characteristics, you don't have to know exactly the standards or technical details of these characteristics. You just have to tell people that you need these things, and then there are people that work on technical side of these things, and that persons those persons are the ones that are going to design toilets in the correct way, and they are going to come up with really good designs. So this is the most interesting and fast way to develop this. It's like we are experts in our needs, not exactly in laws. So you just have to understand what are the needs, and then you can just work on specifications. And about your third question, I use Google Maps. Yeah, almost for everything. Yeah, like if I want to know. where it is something I use Google Maps. I use Google Street View feature to know about accessibility. For example, when someone says it is accessible, I don't believe. I just go to Google Street View and check by myself because probably there is a step. And if I see there is no steps, then I can trust on that person. And Isha, I
Great to
don't know
know.
if you want me to go through other questions on the chat.
Yeah. There are other questions. We have one question from Deliana. She asks, like, do you find any challenges when you're working on projects?
Yeah, all the time. It's like a really big problem, but it's more about the way people think about accessibility and the way they give importance to accessibility. Is like most of the problems are related to uh, this perspective of accessibility is not really a priority. It's like it's most of the persons feel that accessibility is for a small amount of persons, and they don't get this idea of accessibility as a thing that improves everyone quality of life. So it is like they feel that they are spending a lot of money on a thing that are going to be used by a small amount of persons. So that's the biggest challenge is overcome these things. And there is a second big challenge which is about uh, overcoming the the way people see us in terms of social perception, like the way people still talk to us as if we are just kids or people that can't think or things like that. So it is, for example, when I talk about the booking in advance and problems if I don't book in advance for trains or airplanes, it's like uh, when I get to those places, a train station or an airport, there is always someone that will give me a speech like how I should have done that before because it is really important and I have to book and I have to do that. And I know I have to do these things because someone said it's not because they are useful for someone because in most of the times these are completely useless rules. But the thing is like people like to control the way we use spaces. So that's really the problem. People want to make sure that they are the ones that are in charge, and they are the ones that controls the way we live and those things. So this is the second big challenge. Yeah.
I hope that answers you, Deliana. Related to the aeroplane travel, I think Egna had a very nice question. Egna, do you want to ask or shall I read it out? You can go ahead and ask.
Hi Diego, how are you? And I know you talk about airplane and long distance travel by train. Just out of my curiosity, in UK, do they provide like in a long train, like overnight train? Is it like wheelchair accessible? Also, airplane if you travel to another country, and I never pay attention because it just these 2 years I didn't go anywhere, you know. So what do you what do you think about that? Have you come across to this airplane and train?
Yeah, in terms of night trains, most of them in UK, I think there are two. If I'm not wrong, there are two night trains, and those are accessible. They have one cabin, which is accessible and have more space for a wheelchair user, so we can just get inside and have one bed and use that bed. And of course, it is not. Um, it is not really the same experience as everyone else because for for everyone else you can for example have a shower, and we don't have an accessible shower, but we have an accessible toilet. So it is these little differences that makes some for some people can be the difference between travel or not to travel. For me, wouldn't be really a problem because it's only one night and it's not a huge problem. But uh, for some people that want to have a shower during the travel, yeah, that may be a problem. In terms of airplanes, it also depends on um, um, on the country. So, for example, in European countries, those who are um, under European Union laws, uh, they have to provide you services, specific services for disabled persons. There is always available assistance at the airports. So there are services in all airports that have international flights. Um, and of course, these services uh, are different according to the airport and to the country. So they are not exactly the same at the same level of quality. For example, I know that the Lisbon one is really good, but for example, in Madrid is not so good as the Lisbon one. For example, it is different. Uh, and of course, there is some countries outside European Union which are forced to have this because they have fights to European Union for example, my experience was with Turkey. They have the same services at the airports. They are not so good as the ones in Portugal or in Belgium or UK, but they, they have and they work. Uh, and of course, these are generally not so bad. The problem is when they damage your wheelchair or other equipment that you take with you. So, for example, I can't go with my wheelchair inside the airplane, so it's like they have to put it in the cargo bay, and and that means that someone else will touch my wheelchair, and that actually scares me a lot because probably they will probably damage the wheelchair, and it's this already happened before. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for answering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Diogo. Thank you.
Yeah. One question that I missed, it was from Chinonso. She has asked that you had mentioned that 70 to 90% of the disabled people are unemployed. What type of employment do you often see those hold? And what type of opportunities would you like to see more of those with disabilities?
Well, again, it will depend on the country. For example, in Portugal, there are some people that are like they work as on yeah, they work on call centers and things like that. That's the one thing that came from an old perspective of work for disabled persons. So it's like uh, at some points there was some rules from the dictatorship governments we had before, and they felt like blind persons could work as call center operators, and these things are still in place because people got them in their minds. So it is a mindset, and it is difficult to overcome that. Um, it is now changing a bit because of the generations, and as the new generations come to positions where they can change things, they actually do some small changes, and you can start noticing them. And of course, as you get more access to education, especially to university, you also get different opportunities to work, and so it is really a question of how is your educational system is working for everyone, or is just working for some people. And of course there is then after the education part, you have then to think about how companies still see us as persons, and still see us as people that have something to contribute. For example, I had problems about finding a job before, and it was really hard to explain that I have these skills about accessibility and knowledge about transport, etc., and I can use that knowledge to make something. And people really um, didn't understood that very well. And of course, now I got a job where I can make the difference, and it's just amazing, this feeling of working on a place that makes us feel like everyone else. Yeah. So for example, in Netherlands there is a, um, a weird and specific thing. It's they mostly employ disabled persons on organizations for disabled persons. So it is a bit weird because you are like segregating people in a way that you may think it's not segregating, but in fact it is. It's like the same thing as if you only employ black people on organizations for black people. It doesn't make sense. These people can do any job. So it is, they don't have to just be employed in those jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for answering that. We have just a minute left, but it's fine. I mean, Rosie Kohli, she has a question. Rosie ma'am, do you want to go ahead and ask the question yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for telling us so many things. Thank you so much. My question is, see, government have, in spite of government has reserves seats for disabled people, still big companies and corporate houses, they don't give job, thinking they are not capable. But I feel the disabled people are more capable. So, as a local guide, how we can motivate people and corporate houses, our voice reaches still there using social media platform, how can we help?
I think I think your work as local guides is like is important in terms of visibility. So every time you post something about accessibility, for example, and you are making people aware this is a need. It's like every time you say like a shop is not accessible or it is accessible, you are making these things visible. So in fact, you are already doing this. You are already making people aware that we exist, and that's the first step. It's like you have to make people aware of our existence, and because of that, people will then understand that we are persons and we have needs, we have skills, and we know things, and we can give something to society. We are not just a burden that society have to deal with. We are persons that have things to give back to society. So because of what you do right now, when you go somewhere and you evaluate that space and you make some comments and you put information on Google Maps, you are making people aware that we exist and we need those things. So it's like you are already doing that job and you are doing that really well. So it is something like the thing is more about the amount of people that are doing this. So of course we know that we are all a small group of persons that are really interested on this, but as as we go further with this work and as we do more things, we become more and becoming more we become more visible and we have more information available, and these things are like a snowball effect. So yeah, this is
Thank you so
working actually.
much.
So,
Thank you so much. Because
yeah, thank you.
big corporate houses now they avoid disabled people at their places. So that's
Yeah,
why. Thank you so much.
I don't really think this kind of community houses are the best solution because they basically segregate us to a place and they don't put us in the same place as everyone else. So this is something that we have to think about. Like, are we uh, making things that we think they are accessible but or inclusive, but are they really inclusive? Are these community places really the best option, or should we just do things to make people live where everyone else lives? Because that's what makes us visible, being in the same places as everyone else.
Can I have a
Thank you.
one more question?
Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, since we are all here local guide and we do review all the time, and I'm sure all of us put that emoji sign, a vulture sign, and review. Do you think it helps so much? So before you read the whole review, you see the sign of the emoji vulture. Will that help
Yeah, it
a
helps
lot?
a lot because when you, of course, another day Jessica was posting something that she did with these emojis, and I was asking her if she could know before if it is accessible for blind persons, and yeah, we understood it is. But for us, as persons that can see, having this visual helps in the descriptions is really useful because you just call the attention. It's like the same thing when you use hashtags. Like you put there an hashtag at the beginning of the text, and it calls attention because there is an hashtag there. And for example, if you put there as a saying accessible, hashtag accessible, so you just call the attention. It's more easy to go through these things. Yeah, I think emojis work in the same way when you go to the comment section and you just see the emoji and that that it is there is a comment about accessibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you all, and thank you, especially Diego, for taking out time. And it was like we are really honored to have you here and speak and learn so much about accessibility from you. It's true that we have a different perspective than you, because you are also are there in designing and all. So thank you so much for sharing your views and perspectives with all of us. And we are glad to know that you also use Google Maps. So we are happy that it's helping somebody somewhere, that the efforts that we put. So we are really happy and lucky to have you here. Thank you so much for your time, Diogo.
Thank you so much for your invitation, and I hope this helps everyone to improve the way
Yeah.
that you see the world and the way you use Google Maps. Yeah, and thank you
Yes.
for your work. It's really priceless. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Diego. It was really kind of you to say so. And before we go, can we have a happy smiles once screenshot so that I take it as a photo? So put on
Sure,
your
sure.
cameras. Whoever wants to come in the picture, please feel free to put on your cameras, and we'll capture a picture. Okay. Whoever can take, you can also take, because I won't come if I take. So yeah. So everyone ready? Three, two, one. Okay. Smile. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was lovely to see you all and have you all at the meetup. And once again, thank you, Diogo, for your precious time and helping us understand about accessibility more. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Diogo.
Isha.
Thanks,
Bye.
Diogo. Thanks, Isa.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Yes.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks, Isha. Thanks, Diego. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.